I thought buying my parents a dream vacation would make them love me. Instead, they called me ungrateful. Stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'm Lena, I'm 27, and I had just gotten a promotion that finally gave me some financial freedom. I decided to surprise my parents, Harold and Joyce, by secretly paying for a week-long luxury trip to Hawaii. I imagined their faces lighting up with joy, expecting hugs and thank yous, maybe even a little pride. Instead, I got silence and awkward smiles. When I handed them the gift box with the travel itinerary, Joyce muttered, "We didn't need all this. It's too much." Harold barely looked up, nodding politely. I tried to hide my disappointment, telling myself maybe they were just overwhelmed. But from the very first day on the trip, their complaints never stopped. The villa wasn't exactly what they wanted, the food wasn't perfect, and even small inconveniences turned into arguments. I kept quiet, thinking they'd eventually enjoy themselves, but the constant criticism made my heart sink. On the fourth day, I overheard Joyce whispering to Harold, "I can't believe she spent all this money. Does she think we owe her now?" My chest tightened. They weren't grateful. They were angry. I had given them everything I could without asking for anything, and it had been twisted into a debt they felt I owed them. That night, I confronted them quietly. "I wanted to make you happy. I love you. Why are you treating me like this?" Harold's response cut deeper than I expected. "We don't need your money. Stop trying to buy our love." For the first time, I felt the full weight of betrayal. The people who were supposed to be proud of me were seeing my generosity as an obligation. I realized I couldn't keep giving while they treated love as a transaction. Slowly, I decided to take control of my life. I focused on my career, stopped spending on things that weren't appreciated, and built my independence. A few months later, I invited them to a family dinner, acting as if everything was fine. I casually mentioned a new business I was funding and how I was building it without needing anyone's approval. They were surprised, and I could see the panic in their eyes. I had changed. I had become someone they couldn't control. I invested my money in my dream cafe, creating a place I loved, hiring people who supported me, and watching it grow. My parents would come by sometimes, trying to guilt me, saying, "We're your parents. We deserve," but I stayed calm. I told them, "I gave because I loved. I stopped because you treated love as a transaction." They finally understood, but it was too late to undo the damage. Now I feel free. I feel respected. They still call me ungrateful sometimes, but it no longer hurts. I've learned that love isn't about buying approval or gifts. True respect comes from standing up for yourself, even when the people you love don't deserve it. Lena had spent weeks planning every detail of the trip. She reserved first-class flights, a secluded villa with ocean views, and added experiences she knew her parents had always dreamed about. Helicopter rides over volcanic craters, private spa treatments, and sunset cruises. She imagined the joy on their faces, the excitement, the hugs, and laughter. On the morning she planned to reveal the surprise, she carefully wrapped everything in an elegant box. Inside, she included the full itinerary, tickets, and little personalized notes for each experience. Her hands trembled with anticipation as she carried the gift to her parents, imagining the smiles she thought were guaranteed. When she finally handed the box to them, Harold and Joyce barely looked at it. Harold gave a quick nod, while Joyce muttered something under her breath. "We didn't need all this. It's too much." Lena froze for a moment, her chest tightening. She had expected overwhelming excitement, maybe even tears of happiness, but instead she faced a cold, almost indifferent response. She smiled politely, forcing warmth into her voice. "I just wanted to do something special for you both." But her words seemed to float into empty air. The spark she had imagined, the laughter, the hugs, never came. The room felt heavy, and she felt a sting of confusion. Why wouldn't they be thrilled? She had worked so hard to create the perfect surprise. Lena took a deep breath, pushing down the disappointment that threatened to surface. She told herself to stay calm, to not let this moment ruin the effort she had poured into planning. She watched them handle the box carefully, flipping through the itinerary with no enthusiasm. Every detail she had meticulously arranged, the villa, the flights, the excursions, felt unnoticed, unappreciated. In that moment, Lena realized that her gift, no matter how thoughtful or expensive, might never be received with gratitude. Her mind raced, trying to understand what she had done wrong, if perhaps she had misjudged what would make them happy. Still, she maintained a composed exterior, hiding the confusion and hurt swirling inside. Even as she smiled and encouraged them to look closer at the plans, she felt an odd mixture of disappointment and disbelief. She had hoped for shared excitement, for a memory they could all cherish together, yet the reaction she received was lukewarm at best. Lena knew she would have to watch carefully, perhaps guide them gently through each day of the trip, hoping that somewhere along the way they would appreciate her efforts. By the end of the morning, the gift sat open on the table, their attention already drifting to mundane concerns, and Lena quietly resolved to stay composed. She would keep her disappointment private, but inside, a small seed of unease had been planted, a realization that love and generosity were not always met with joy, and sometimes even the best intentions could be met with coldness. From the moment they arrived, the vacation Lena had carefully arranged began to feel like a battlefield. Every morning, her parents found something to criticize. The breakfast wasn't hot enough, the towels weren't folded properly, the chairs on the balcony weren't aligned just right. Even the gentle breeze over the ocean became a point of irritation for Joyce, who complained about the humidity and the sun. Harold's temper showed more clearly each day. A minor mix-up with a room service order caused him to raise his voice at the staff, pointing fingers and demanding immediate correction. Lena's stomach twisted with anger, but she forced herself to stay calm, biting back her words as she apologized repeatedly for things that weren't her fault. Inside, however, frustration bubbled. She had imagined this trip as peaceful and joyful, yet every gesture of care seemed to be met with criticism. She began to notice a pattern. Nothing she did or planned could satisfy them. The spa sessions, which she thought would delight her mother, were met with complaints about the schedule. The helicopter ride, meant to thrill her father, only triggered comments about the cost and the weather. Lena felt as though her efforts had been weaponized against her, turned into an excuse for blame rather than appreciation. Each night, as they returned to the villa, the tension lingered. She tried small gestures, bringing fresh flowers, suggesting local excursions, making sure every meal suited their tastes, but the resistance persisted. Her patience thinned, and a quiet resentment took root. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was the slow recognition that her parents were willing to drain her goodwill without acknowledging it. Lena's heart ached as she realized how heavy the trip had become. What she had envisioned as a time for connection now felt like a minefield, where every act of generosity was scrutinized and every attempt to please was met with dissatisfaction. She continued to smile, kept her voice steady, and offered her assistance politely, but the warmth she had hoped to share was swallowed by their complaints. By the third day, Lena could no longer ignore the growing frustration inside her. Her careful planning, her thoughtful gestures, her desire to create memories, all of it seemed to fuel their discontent rather than their happiness. The generosity she had offered freely now felt like a liability, a vulnerability that her parents exploited without thought. Despite the mounting tension, Lena stayed composed in front of them, quietly recording each moment in her mind. She told herself she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her anger, but inside, a new determination began to take shape. Their constant disapproval, instead of breaking her, was slowly igniting a resolve she hadn't felt before, a resolve to protect herself and reclaim her peace, even in the midst of betrayal. On the fourth morning, Lena was walking down the villa hallway when she heard Joyce's voice carrying from the living room. Curious, she paused by the doorway and froze as the words reached her ears. "I can't believe she spent all this money. Does she think we owe her now?" Harold didn't respond, but the tone in his silence was enough. A chill ran through Lena's body. She had imagined that her efforts would be seen as love, as care, not as an obligation. Every late night she had worked extra hours, every sacrifice she had quietly made, every thoughtful touch she had planned for this trip suddenly felt twisted. Instead of gratitude, they measured her generosity as a debt to be repaid, as though her affection had a price tag. Her chest tightened, and a lump formed in her throat. Lena had always put them first, often bending to their needs and wishes without complaint, giving without expectation. And now, in one sentence overheard from the doorway, it became clear that they never truly saw her love. They only saw the cost. The villa, the flights, the excursion, all of it, which she had imagined as tokens of her care, felt meaningless in that moment. The sting of betrayal cut deeper than any argument or complaint could. She had trusted them to recognize her intentions, to feel the sincerity behind every gesture, but instead, they reduced everything she did to numbers and bills. Lena's mind replayed the years she had silently sacrificed for their comfort, the countless dinners she had skipped to help with bills, the nights she had stayed awake worrying about them, the small gifts and surprises she had always offered without seeking acknowledgement. To hear them speak as if she were trying to manipulate them, as if her love came with strings attached, shattered her. She retreated to her room, closing the door softly behind her, and sat on the edge of the bed. The betrayal wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, insidious, and profoundly painful. She realized that no matter how much she gave, no matter how much she tried, their perception of her efforts could never match her intentions. A mixture of sadness, anger, and disbelief swirled inside her. Her love had always been unconditional, yet now it felt like a weapon turned against her. Lena understood that this trip, which she had envisioned as a bridge to closeness and appreciation, had instead revealed a harsh truth. Her parents saw her generosity as an obligation, not as an act of the heart. For the first time in years, Lena felt truly seen, not for what she gave, but for what they assumed she expected. That recognition, though painful, ignited something else in her, a quiet resolve to protect her kindness, to be cautious about giving, and to confront a reality she had long avoided. That love, even from family, was not always freely returned. That evening, Lena waited until her parents were settled in the villa's lounge before she approached them. Her hands trembled slightly, and her voice wavered, but she forced herself to speak. "I planned this trip because I wanted to make you happy," she began softly. "I love you, so why are you treating me this way?" Harold's eyes narrowed, and his posture stiffened. He looked at her with a cold detachment that sent a shiver through her. "We don't need your money," he said bluntly. "Stop trying to buy our love." The words hit Lena like a punch, sharp and unrelenting. She had expected resistance, maybe a bit of misunderstanding, but not this complete dismissal of her feeling. For a moment, she just stood there, stunned. Her chest felt tight, and the warmth she had carried for them all these years seemed to drain away. The effort, the excitement, the care she had poured into the trip, all of it suddenly felt invisible. She felt exposed, as if everything she had done to show love had been twisted into an insult in their eyes. Joyce didn't speak, but her silence carried its own weight. Lena could feel the judgment radiating from both of them, like an invisible barrier between her heart and theirs. Shame and disbelief twisted together, and she struggled to find her footing in the conversation. She had hoped for understanding, maybe a moment of recognition, but instead she felt dismissed and belittled. The villa, the ocean views, the luxurious experiences, all of it meant nothing if they refused to see her intentions. Lena's mind raced through the years she had sacrificed for them quietly, the time she had supported them financially, the small gestures she had made to ease their burdens, the countless efforts she had made to bring joy into their lives. And now it all seemed to have counted for nothing. Her throat burned with unshed tears, but she held herself upright, trying to keep her dignity intact. The sense of rejection was overwhelming, but underneath it, a small spark of clarity began to form. She realized that no matter how much she gave, her love would not be validated if they refused to acknowledge it. Humiliation washed over her, accompanied by a bitter ache of disappointment. She had opened her heart fully, and it had been met with coldness. Lena could feel the weight of unappreciation pressing down, heavy and suffocating, but amidst the pain, a quiet awareness began to grow. She understood that this confrontation, though painful, had revealed a truth she could no longer ignore. Their affection was conditional, and her generosity could not guarantee love. As she stepped away, retreating to the sanctuary of her room, Lena's heart was fractured, yet a subtle determination began to take root. She knew she had to protect herself from this hurt, and though the moment stung deeply, it would mark the beginning of a shift, one where she would no longer let their coldness dictate her self-worth. After that confrontation, Lena felt a shift inside her, a quiet determination that hadn't been there before. She realized she had been giving freely, expecting love in return, and it had only left her exposed and vulnerable. From that moment, she resolved to take control of her life in ways that mattered most: her career, her money, and her independence. She began making careful decisions about her finances, channeling her resources into opportunities that would benefit her long-term instead of indulging others' expectations. Every dollar she saved or invested felt like a small reclaiming of power, a step toward freedom from the constant need to please. She researched options, set goals, and quietly built plans that didn't include anyone who had dismissed her efforts. Her demeanor began to shift, almost imperceptibly at first. She no longer rushed to serve or anticipate her parents' desires. She listened less to complaints and focused more on her own ambitions. The sparkle in her eyes, once fueled by their approval, now carried a calm, confident energy. She moved with purpose, letting her priorities guide her rather than their moods. Harold and Joyce noticed the change immediately. The eager, compliant daughter they were used to was no longer at their beck and call. They exchanged uneasy glances when she politely declined their requests or suggested doing something on her own schedule. Lena's quiet confidence unsettled them more than any argument could. They sensed the growing distance, but they didn't understand the resolve behind it. Inside, Lena felt a subtle satisfaction. This wasn't about punishment or confrontation yet. It was about reclaiming herself. Every choice she made, every careful boundary she set, became a reinforcement of her self-respect. She no longer allowed their dissatisfaction to dictate her actions or her mood. Even simple things, like handling the trip's remaining days or managing conversations, were approached with a calm detachment she hadn't shown before. She smiled when needed, but no longer sought approval in every interaction. It was a small, steady rebellion, one that required patience and restraint, but it planted seeds of change she could feel growing inside her. Lena began imagining a future where she thrived without seeking validation from those who had undervalued her efforts. Every step she took toward her independence felt like a quiet, personal victory. She was reclaiming her life, one deliberate choice at a time, and in doing so, she discovered a sense of power that no criticism or cold remark could take away. By the end of the week, her parents were unsettled by the new Lena, polite, composed, but no longer malleable. The overly eager daughter they had relied on for emotional comfort was gone, replaced by someone who understood the value of herself, her efforts, and her future. Lena decided to invite her parents to a dinner at a small, elegant restaurant, presenting it as a chance to enjoy the last night of their trip together. She spoke with a calm, easy tone, giving the impression that everything was fine, that the past day's tension had been forgotten. The table was set perfectly, and she guided the conversation lightly, asking about minor details of their day as if nothing had happened. Halfway through the meal, Lena casually brought up a new project she had been working on, an idea she had nurtured quietly over the past months. "I've been funding a little venture," she said, "and I'm inviting a few people to get involved. It's exciting, and it's finally taking off." She watched carefully as Harold and Joyce exchanged subtle glances, their expressions shifting from curiosity to unease. They asked questions about the project, trying to gauge how much control they might have, and Lena answered politely but firmly, making it clear that this was her initiative. She mentioned that she would be collaborating with people outside the family, that she wanted to grow it independently. Her words were soft but carried an unmistakable firmness. Lena noticed their reactions. Harold's jaw tightened slightly, and Joyce's eyes flicked away as if she were caught off guard. The slight panic in their movements, the uncharacteristic hesitation in their voices, told Lena that they were realizing she was no longer the daughter they could sway or manipulate it. The power balance had shifted, subtly but decisively, and Lena felt a quiet satisfaction at the change. Throughout the dinner, Lena maintained her composure, smiling and nodding, allowing them to feel included while keeping the real control firmly in her hand. She noticed how tense they became whenever she mentioned her independent plans or decisions she had made without their input. Each moment of their discomfort reinforced the fact that they had underestimated her, that their assumptions about her willingness to comply had been wrong. By the end of the evening, Lena had created a subtle but clear statement. She was no longer beholden to their expectations. Her tone, her posture, and even her casual mentions of new ventures conveyed confidence and self-possession. The emotional tension at the table was palpable. They realized, maybe for the first time, that she had grown beyond their influence. As they left the restaurant, Lena felt a quiet triumph. She had orchestrated the evening to appear ordinary, but underneath, she had demonstrated her independence. She had taken control without confrontation, showing them that their previous assumptions about her loyalty and compliance no longer applied. The night ended with smiles and polite exchanges, but Lena knew the truth. The daughter they had tried to manipulate was gone, replaced by someone strong, aware, and unafraid to claim her space. Lena finally decided to put her plans into motion, using the funds she had saved for her parents' extravagances to start her own cafe. She found a charming little space in a quiet street and transformed it with her own vision. Warm colors, cozy seating, and a menu full of thoughtful touches she knew people would love. Every detail reflected her personality, from the hand-painted signs to the carefully curated playlists that played in the background. She recruited a small team of employees who shared her values and work ethic, including neighbors who had quietly noticed how demanding her parents could be. They understood her frustrations and supported her with encouragement and subtle humor, creating a work environment that felt more like a family than a job. Their loyalty allowed Lena to focus on building the cafe without being drained by constant tension. The cafe quickly became a favorite spot in the community. Locals came for the atmosphere, the quality of the food, and the way Lena and her team made every visitor feel welcome. Word of mouth spread fast, and soon the little cafe was bustling with regulars who appreciated Lena's attention to detail and genuine care. It was a validation she hadn't received from her family, but now experienced fully in her. Harold and Joyce eventually learned about the cafe and, out of curiosity, stopped by. They were surprised by the turnout and impressed by the success, but it was clear they felt out of place. The regulars, the energy, the loyalty, they all revolved around Lena, leaving her parents on the outside. For the first time, she saw them confronted with the reality that her life and accomplishments did not depend on their approval. Lena felt a quiet satisfaction as she watched them leave after a short visit. Their reactions were subtle, slight discomfort, forced smiles, and awkward questions, but she knew the message had landed. She had built something remarkable without asking for their validation, and they couldn't take any part of it away. Each day, as she walked through the cafe, greeting customers and overseeing her team, Lena felt a sense of empowerment. She wasn't seeking revenge in anger or confrontation. Her satisfaction came from creating a life she controlled, where her talents and efforts were recognized and valued. Every cup of coffee served, every smile exchanged, was a quiet affirmation of her independence. The cafe had become more than a business. It was a statement. It represented her ability to reclaim her time, resources, and respect. While her parents could see her thriving, they could no longer influence her choices or diminish her achievement. Lena had transformed her frustration and hurt into something tangible and fulfilling, turning the pain of being undervalued into a source of pride and quiet triumph. A few weeks after the cafe opened, Harold and Joyce came to Lena's apartment unannounced, their faces a mixture of frustration and apprehension. They carried a quiet tension, the kind that comes when someone believes they still have leverage but senses it slipping away. Harold's voice broke first. "We're your parents. We deserve," he began, hoping to tug at her sense of obligation. Joyce's eyes welled slightly, adding weight to his words, as if their combined presence should be enough to make her relent. Lena took a deep breath, steadying herself before responding. She met their gaze with calm clarity, her voice firm yet measured. "I gave because I loved," she said softly. "I stopped because you treated love as a transaction." She didn't raise her voice, didn't flinch. Every word carried a quiet finality. The sentence hung in the room, simple but powerful, cutting through the unspoken expectations they had always placed on her. For a moment, Harold and Joyce were silent, caught off guard by the firmness and honesty in her tone. Their attempts at guilt, the pressure of parental authority, failed to shake her. Lena stood tall, composed, and unwavering, the very image of someone who had reclaimed control over her life. They felt, for the first time, the consequences of their own actions, the sting of emotional accountability. Harold shifted uncomfortably, his pride clashing with the reality he now faced. Joyce looked away, unable to argue without confronting her own misjudgment. The realization slowly sank in. The daughter they had tried to manipulate was no longer the same. She had changed, grown, and established boundaries that they could not overstep. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. Lena was no longer at their mercy. Lena watched them process her words, her calm confidence reinforcing the message. She didn't need to repeat herself or justify her actions further. The clarity in her stance left no room for misunderstanding. Every attempt to guilt her to regain control had been rendered ineffective by her quiet strength and unwavering self-respect. The moment was transformative, not just for Lena, but for her parents as well. They had spent years assuming she would bend, forgive, or comply, but she had drawn a line. The realization of their misjudgment was uncomfortable, almost painful, and yet it was entirely deserved. Lena had turned the tables without confrontation, without anger, simply through honesty, composure, and asserting her boundaries. As they left, the tension remained, but Lena felt a sense of liberation. She had spoken her truth, and it had been heard. The emotional weight she had carried for years began to lift, replaced by the quiet empowerment of knowing she could stand her ground. For the first time, she fully understood that respect could not be demanded, only earned, and in claiming it, she had changed the rules of their relationship forever. Lena sank into the rhythm of her new life, finally feeling the lightness of freedom she had longed for. Every morning at the cafe, she moved with purpose, greeted her customers warmly, and oversaw her team with quiet authority. The weight of needing her parents' approval had lifted, replaced by the satisfaction of building something on her own terms. Respect came naturally here, from her employees, her neighbors, and the community, and it felt profoundly different from the hollow recognition she had once sought from Harold and Joyce. Occasionally, her parents would stop by, their faces tense with old expectations. One afternoon, Joyce muttered the familiar accusation, "You're so ungrateful." But this time Lena only smiled softly, a small, knowing smile. It no longer cut her, no longer demanded that she justify herself. She had learned the truth. Their words could not dictate her worth, and their judgments were irrelevant to the life she had claimed for herself. The victory she felt wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, contained in the confidence that she had reclaimed her power and dignity. Her subtle revenge had not required confrontation or anger. It had grown organically from her independence and ability to nurture her own dream. Every success of the cafe, every satisfied customer, every respectful exchange reinforced her sense of accomplishment. She realized that she had achieved something far greater than mere revenge. She had earned her own life, shaped by her choices, not their approval. As the afternoon sunlight streamed through the cafe windows, Lena stood by the counter and gazed outside, watching people stroll by, children laughing, and neighbors chatting. She allowed herself a moment of reflection, letting the calm settle over her. Her heart was steady, unburdened, and proud. The memories of disappointment and betrayal still existed, but they no longer held power over her. Lena whispered to herself, almost like a mantra, "Sometimes love isn't enough, but self-respect always is. It felt like a truth she had carried through every difficult moment, now fully realized. The cafe, the community she had built, and her own strength were living proof of that principle. She had turned the pain of unappreciated love into empowerment, and in doing so, she had transformed herself. For the first time in years, Lena felt completely untethered from the expectations and judgments of her parents. Her world was hers to shape, filled with people who valued her and a life that reflected her worth. She allowed herself to laugh quietly, a soft, victorious sound, knowing that the daughter they had tried to control no longer existed. In her place stood a woman confident, independent, and fully aware of her own power, calmly and quietly triumphant. Hey besties, thanks for sticking with me till the end of this intense story. Lena gave her all to please her parents, only to be dismissed and misunderstood, but she turned their betrayal into strength. Now independent and respected, she's thriving on her own terms. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more real-life emotional journeys. See you in the next one.